All right, guys, and this is going to be the last video for this unit and this PowerPoint, and I just want to thank you guys for bearing with me. I know it's kind of a lot of information, and went into a lot of detail on specific slides, but for good reason. But yeah, so basically, this all boils down to after those battles, basically, uh, Santa Anna comes to the rescue of the people in Anahuac and Turtle Bayou because Santa Anna, who was a general at the time, he launches what you call a military coup or a military takeover, kicks out Bustamante, doesn't kill him, but kicks him out, and he's elected president in 1833. Wouldn't say really elected, or he is, but he kind of puts himself in power, and eventually we'll see that he becomes pretty much a dictator. But his election at first gives great hope to Anglo Americans in Texas, or just Texans in general, Tejanos as well. Um, and when he is elected president in 1833, um, Texans hoped that they would, uh, he would institute the Constitution of 1824, which, of course, remember, is a Federalist, states' rights friendly constitution, and would give Texas back, local control, especially just becoming a state again. Because remember, it is still merged with Coahuila. Going back to Coahuila, Texas, it still looks like that. And Texas wants to be, that shape right there. They want to be their own thing. They don't want to be involved with Coahuila because it goes really deep into Mexico. It's a totally different thing with more people, different ideas. But you can understand why Mexico doesn't want that, because so many of these Anglo Americans are trying to rip away Texas from Mexico. So when Santa Anna takes power, they're going to have this convention of 1832 or 1833. And this is going to be run by none only than Stephen F. Austin. When they have this convention, what he wants to allow U.S. immigration, uh, Anglo immigration. Wants Texas to become a separate state, exempt Texas from customs duties. So those taxes, those tariffs, the raises on prices on American goods, and also provide land for schools. He just wants someone to stop wailing on Texas and just give them the rights. The thing about this, though, is that when he has this convention, he invites all the leaders all over Texas, Anglos and Tejanos included. Coincidentally enough, Tejanos didn't show up, and it was overwhelmingly, I think all of them were Anglos. And when he's there, people are talking about revolution. They're talking about uh, not just being goody goody with Mexico. They're talking about, hey, we want to separate. And again, this angers Austin so much. And he's such like he tries to be such a mediator of peace, or like someone who's really trying to just have things work in Texas without messing anything up. And he wants to make both sides happy. He is for states' rights, obviously, and the rights for his people, but he's also doesn't want to just mess over the Mexicans. But people are there and they're talking about revolution and separating, and he gets really upset about that. But with that being said, funny enough, as hard as he tries to make everyone happy, Austin is arrested. So he gets arrested. It's quite a crazy ordeal. So to meet all these demands right here, allow U.S. immigration again, Anglo immigration. He wants Texas to become its own state, and obviously everything else from exempting them from tax duties and etc. He goes out to a 3 month mission to Mexico City. It takes a while to get there. There's no cars or planes. It's quite a long walk, but they used horses and carriages. And this turns out to be such a unfortunate deal for Austin, because Santa Anna says he's dealing with a bunch of other stuff, kind of understandably so. He just took over an entire nation. He couldn't meet with Austin's demands until November. And Austin, very frustrated, wrote to the Texas government ordering them to go ahead and begin organizing a Texas state government, even though that demand had not yet to be granted. So he said, forget it, I'm not going to wait this long. We have stuff to do in Texas. He's probably certain that, Santa Anna, all for states' rights, will grant him that. And he's also very frustrated that he won't meet with them. So he just writes this letter saying, hey, go ahead, we're organizing a Texas state government, as in no more Coahuila, just Texas, like Texas, no more, merging of states, just Texas as a state itself. And that's all he wanted. Remember, he did not want, he didn't want to separate. But, when this happens, when he sends this letter, Santa Anna was nice enough to meet all his demands, except making Texas its own separate state. Austin, he was like, all right, you know what? Whatever. I'm going to, go ahead. I'm going to go back to Texas. I did the best I could. But when Austin returned to Texas, he was met by Mexican officials who intercepted that letter he had written, and that got him arrested. So they got him arrested for this kind of miscommunication and frustration, because it looks like he revolted, right? He said he wrote a letter that Mexican troops intercepted, or Mexican officials, and it says they see a letter from Austin saying, like, hey, make your own government. And that demand was never met. And so Austin is imprisoned for a year without trial, for challenging the Mexican government. So this poor Stephen F. Austin, such a good guy, I think, trying to meet the demands of everyone, trying to be such a good politician, gets arrested for this sort of miscommunication of sorts. But also, he really did want that state of Texas. So this is going to lead us into what is going to be the Texas Revolution. Exactly. So not just these, skirmishes, these kind of confusing, admittedly, skirmishes in Anahuac, Bayou, Blasco, and then what I talked about with the Fredonian Rebellion with that guy trying to start his own country. Well, I guess this is what these guys are doing, but in a much more organized fashion. This is gonna make everyone angry. So we'll learn about that in the next unit, and that's when stuff gets really exciting. But let's end these 4 videos off with, what did you learn section. What led the colonists to write the Turtle Bayou resolutions. And that all started at Anahuac with, remember the white Mexican guy, the Anglo guy who joined the Mexican army, Juan Bradburn, and other officials there, really being oppressive with those, if you remember, April 6, 1830 laws. And basically they rebel, and they move on over to close by Turtle Bayou. And while they're doing this whole fighting, they're saying Viva Santa Anna, because they just want their state's rights. And they write these resolutions, if you remember, saying that actually we weren't trying to, start a Texas revolution. We're loyal Mexicans. We just support Federalist states' rights and Santa Anna. And that's what they talk about in those papers. And what impact did the Constitution of 1824 have on events in Texas? So, obviously, I think I mentioned it like 10 times. Texans really supported Santa Anna because they thought they would implement 1824, the Constitution of 1824, because that was that states' rights, um, form of government that would give Texas back its power, because, they were really, really, pretty much oppressing them, but, for good reason, because Texans were being pretty sketchy over there. They were, there was all these skirmishes and, rebellions, or almost rebellions, and eventually after Austin gets arrested, the rebellion really starts, but we'll learn about that later. And so, to wrap up this chapter, what role did government regulation of trade play in growing conflict between Texans and the Mexican government. So that goes back to 1830. That goes back to um, those laws and how basically it almost you can relate it to the American Revolution. You know, no taxation without representation. You guys will learn about that in eighth grade, but people don't like it when they are taxed and they find it unfair, and it is kind of a thing in America, and these are Anglo-Americans, to rebel against people who are taxing them to death for no good reason. And then how did Santa Anna's decision to set aside the Constitution of 1824 create a centralist government effect in Texas? So how do you think that decision to not grant, uh, Texas its statehood, but he did grant them everything else, but not granting that statehood, basically, that's not the Constitution of 1824. That's not states' rights. And also, he arrested Stephen F. Austin for a year without trial over a letter. So that's when he starts to switch up, That's when he starts to switch sides. And people aren't saying Viva Santa Anna when that happens. And finally, how do you think the problems facing a young Mexican nation affected policies towards Texas? And so you have to understand, I think it's so interesting because you may have learned elsewhere, this the heroes of the Texas Revolution, fighting an oppressive government, and you can say that, yes, but it's such a complex thing where I could absolutely understand where they're coming from. Like uh, there's so much unrest in Texas, and there's actual filibusters. Remember, filibusters are people who are trying to rip Texas away from Mexico for whatever reason, to create Texas as its own country, or for America. And also just, yeah, guys like Hayden Edwards trying to create his own country. All the skirmishes, Anna Huac, like they let them, remember, if you remember, they let uh they let Texans do what they want. They would say, hey, they were saying, remember, going all the way back to where is it? Let's see if I can find it. Um, yes. So, I forget where it is, but basically, Mexico. Remember, Mexico banned slavery like a billion times. Like they banned slavery about like 3 or 4 times. And the first 2 times, no one listened. And then they had to bring in all those troops to really enforce it. And then came the dictator Bustamante, who said, okay, I'm really going to crack down on everything because obviously it's running wild in Texas. So, it's up to you. You make your educated decision on like, why do you think Mexico was acting like this? Did they have good reason for it? Do you think the Texans had every right to rebel? Do you think that they, were being oppressed? Or do you think that sort of government crackdown was necessary to keep the nation intact? Because later on, I'll tell you right now, Mexico was much bigger before the Texas Revolution. Mexico took up the entire western half of the United States. And after Texas is taken, or Texas gets its independence, they lose all that through a sequence of events. But what else were the Mexicans supposed to do? So, I want to thank you guys for listening. I hope I could keep you guys engaged, and it's my first time, so hopefully you guys can understand if I did drone on or if I was boring. And if I was, please let me know. Let me know how I can improve my videos, my lessons. Because constructive criticism helps me and it helps you guys too, help you learn. Because that's why I'm here. I don't get paid or anything like that, but I really want to help you guys learn. So again, thank you guys, and I will see you in class.